Taemin stepped off the transport ship and felt his boots hit solid ground for the first time in 3 weeks. The luminary homeworld looked nothing like Earth. Everything glowed with a soft, warm light that seemed to come from within the very air itself. Buildings floated gently above crystalline gardens, and the sky shimmered with colors he had no names for. "Welcome, solid form visitor," came a voice that sounded like wind chimes in his earpiece. The translation device clipped to his collar was working overtime, converting the musical alien language into something he could understand. 3 luminari approached him. They looked like living starlight wrapped in vaguely humanoid shapes. Their forms shifted constantly between solid and translucent, making it hard for Taemin to focus on any one feature. The tallest one, who seemed to be their leader, gestured, with what might have been an arm. "I am Keth Miran, speaker for the Light Council. We have prepared the traditional welcoming ceremony for you." Taemin bowed politely. His diplomatic training kicked in automatically. Always respect local customs, never refuse ceremonial offerings, and smile even when you have no idea what's happening. He'd done this dance on dozens of worlds before. "The honor is mine," he replied, using the formal phrases he'd memorized during the 3-week journey. "I come as Earth's representative, hoping to strengthen the bonds between our peoples." The luminari began to move in slow circles around him. Their bodies pulsed with different colors, creating patterns that hurt his eyes if he stared too long. They were singing, or at least making sounds that his translator kept calling harmonic vocalizations. The melody was actually quite beautiful, even though he couldn't understand the words. More luminari appeared from nowhere, literally materializing out of thin air. Soon, dozens of them surrounded Taemin, all glowing and singing in perfect harmony. The ground beneath his feet began to vibrate with their combined voices. "Please, honored guest, extend your arm," Kethmiran requested. Taemin held out his right arm without hesitation. This was probably some kind of blessing ritual. He'd had mud painted on his face on Kepler 438b, been doused with fermented fruit, juice on Proxima Station, and once had to wear a hat made of living moss for an entire diplomatic dinner. A little alien ceremony was nothing new. The speaker produced what looked like a bracelet made of liquid light. It pulsed with the same rhythm as the singing voices around them. When Kethmiran placed it on Taemin's wrist, it felt warm and slightly tingly, like touching a low-voltage battery. "Now please repeat the words of joining," the speaker said, beginning a new melodic phrase. Taemin's translator was working frantically. Words kept flashing across the small screen. Bond, unity, eternal, joining. He figured it was some kind of friendship treaty or alliance oath. That made sense for a diplomatic visit. He did his best to repeat the musical phrases, though his human vocal cords couldn't quite hit all the harmonic notes the luminari were producing. They seemed pleased with his attempt, their glow brightening considerably. The ceremony continued for what felt like hours. More singing, more light patterns, and several more phrases for him to repeat. The bracelet on his wrist grew warm and began pulsing faster. By the end, all the luminari were practically glowing like small suns, and Taemin felt oddly energized despite his exhaustion from the long journey. "It is done," Kethmiran announced, and the assembled crowd erupted in what could only be described as joyous celebration. "The joining is complete. May your union bring light to both our peoples." Taemin smiled and nodded, still thinking this was all very ceremonial and symbolic. He had no idea that he'd just gotten married. Taemin's eyes snapped open to the sound of gentle humming. For a moment, he forgot where he was. The room was filled with soft, golden light that seemed to dance across the crystalline walls. Then, he remembered. He was on the luminary homeworld in the guest quarters they'd provided after yesterday's ceremony. But something was wrong. Very wrong. There was someone else in his room. A female luminari sat cross-legged on the floor near his bed, her form shifting between solid and translucent as she hummed a melody that made the air itself seem to vibrate. She was beautiful in an otherworldly way, with features that looked almost human when she held her solid form. Her skin glowed with the same warm light as the bracelet on his wrist. "Good morning, my light-bound mate," she said, her voice like silver bells. "I am Lyra Seth. I have been waiting for you to wake, so we may begin our soul-weaving." Taemin shot. upright in bed, pulling the covers up to his chest. "I'm sorry, what? Who are you? How did you get in here?" Lyraseth tilted her head, looking confused. "I am your bonded one. We were joined in ceremony yesterday. Did the translation not work properly?" She gestured to the bracelet on his wrist, which was now pulsing in perfect sync with her own glow. "Bonded one?" Taymin looked down at the bracelet. Now that he was fully awake, he noticed something strange about it. The light wasn't just coming from the bracelet itself. It seemed to be connected to something inside him, like it was drawing energy from his very life force. He tried to pull it off. Nothing happened. He twisted it, tugged at it, even tried to slide it over his hand. The bracelet wouldn't budge. It felt like it had become part of his skin. "What is this thing?" he demanded, panic creeping into his voice. "It is the bond seal," Lyraseth explained patiently. "It connects our life energies. When you spoke the words of joining yesterday and accepted the light band, we became eternal mates. I am so honored. No luminary has ever been chosen by a solid form being before." The room seemed to spin around Taymin. "Words of joining? I thought that was just a diplomatic ceremony, a friendship treaty or something." Lyraseth's glow dimmed slightly. "Did your people not explain the ritual to you? Yesterday was the ceremony of eternal bonding. When you repeated the sacred vows and accepted the light band, you became my husband according to our laws." "Husband?" The word came out as a strangled squeak. Taymin fumbled for his translation device, frantically scrolling through yesterday's recorded conversations. There it was. Every instance where the translator had shown bond and unity, it had actually meant marriage and wedding vows. "This can't be happening," he muttered, staring at the screen. "This has to be some kind of mistake." "There is no mistake," Lyraseth said gently. "The light band has fused with your life essence. Only death can break such a bond now. It is the most sacred commitment in our culture." Taymin's hands were shaking. He was married, to an alien, by accident. His diplomatic career flashed before his eyes, along with his bank account, his apartment back on Earth, and his mother's face when she found out her son had eloped with a being made of living light. "But I didn't know," he protested. "I thought I was just being polite." Lyraseth moved closer, her expression soft with what might have been sympathy. "I understand this is different from your customs, but please do not despair, my mate. I will be a good wife to you. I have studied your species' bonding practices. I will learn to be more solid for you, and perhaps you can learn to share in the light." As if to demonstrate, she solidified completely, looking almost human except for the gentle glow emanating from her skin. She reached out tentatively to touch his hand. The moment their skin made contact, Taymin felt a warm pulse of energy flow between them. The bracelet flared brighter, and for just an instant he could sense something. Emotions that weren't his own, warm and hopeful and genuinely caring. He was definitely married. And somehow, that realization was both the most terrifying and strangely comforting thing that had ever happened to him. Living with Lyraseth was like sharing an apartment with a friendly ghost who had no concept of physics or personal boundaries. Taymin discovered this the hard way on their second morning together, when he woke up to find her floating 3 feet above his bed, studying his sleeping face with curious fascination. "Good morning, lightbound mate," she said cheerfully, slowly, descending until she was sitting cross-legged in mid-air. "How your breathing patterns while unconscious are quite rhythmic, very soothing." "That's great," Taymin mumbled, rubbing his eyes. "But maybe next time you could wait until I'm actually awake before you start, observing me." Lyraseth looked puzzled. "Why? You were still present. Your lifelight was still glowing." Privacy, Taymin quickly learned, was not a concept that translated well to luminary culture. When he tried to take a shower, Lyraseth simply phased through the bathroom wall to continue their conversation. When he attempted to explain that humans needed alone time, she looked genuinely hurt. "But we are bonded now," she said, her glow dimming. "Why would you want to be separated from me?" The food situation was even worse. Lyraseth had enthusiastically volunteered to prepare their meals, explaining that she had studied human nutritional requirements. What she hadn't mentioned was that luminary cooking involved channeling pure energy directly into food. Taemin returned from a communication session with Earth to find his dinner glowing bright blue and emitting a high-pitched humming sound. "I enhanced it with life energy," Lyra Seth announced proudly. "It should provide you with much more vitality than regular solid food." "It's radioactive," Taemin said weakly, watching his meal pulse like a tiny nuclear reactor. "Is that bad for solid forms?" The room itself had undergone a complete transformation. Lyra Seth had decided their quarters needed proper light flow and had somehow acquired dozens of floating crystals that orbited the ceiling like a tiny solar system. The walls now pulsed with soft patterns of color that followed her emotional state. "It feels more like home now," she explained when Taemin stared in bewilderment at what used to be his simple guest room. The worst part was the dream sharing. Every night, Lyra Seth would settle down beside him and gently touch his forehead, attempting to merge their sleeping minds. The first time it happened, Taemin woke up with vivid memories of soaring through space as pure energy, seeing planets as glowing pearls in an infinite dark ocean. "Did you enjoy sharing my dream memories?" she asked the next morning. "It was intense," Taemin admitted, "but humans aren't built for that kind of mental connection. It gave me a headache that lasted 6 hours. Meanwhile, his communication device was buzzing constantly with increasingly frantic messages from Earth. His supervisor, Director Park, had progressed from confused to angry to something approaching panic. "Taemin, you need to fix this situation immediately." Park's voice crackled through the static. "The press is having a field day. Earth diplomat accidentally marries alien is trending on every social network. The president wants your head on a platter." The Luminary government, on the other hand, was treating the whole situation like the diplomatic breakthrough of the century. Speaker Kethmiran had personally congratulated Taemin 3 times, explaining that the marriage represented the ultimate proof of trust between their species. "This sacred union validates everything we hoped for in our alliance," the speaker had said. "Lyra Seth has brought great honor to our people by binding herself to your kind." Caught between 2 governments with completely opposite reactions, Taemin felt like he was being pulled apart. But gradually, he began to notice something that cut through all the chaos and confusion. Every morning, Lyra Seth would materialize a small flower made of light and place it beside his bed. When he caught a cold from the stress, she spent 3 days learning to brew actual tea instead of her energy-enhanced beverages. She started solidifying herself for longer periods when she noticed that her phasing made him nervous. Despite the floating crystals, radioactive food, and complete lack of privacy, Lyra Seth was genuinely trying to make him happy. Her efforts were bizarre and often dangerous, but they came from a place of real affection. Maybe being accidentally married to an energy being wasn't the worst thing that could happen to a person. The emergency transmission from Earth came through. At 3 in the morning, ship time. Director Park's face filled the holographic display, and he looked like he hadn't slept in days. His usually neat hair was disheveled, and there were dark circles under his eyes. "Taemin, this has gone too far," Park said without any greeting. "The media circus back home is completely out of control. We've got protesters outside the embassy, half of them calling you a hero for interspecies relations, and the other half demanding your arrest for abandoning your humanity." Taemin sat on the edge of his bed, still groggy from sleep. Beside him, Lyra Seth had solidified into her most human-like form, trying to follow the conversation despite the rapid-fire Korean that Park was speaking. "Sir, I'm trying to handle the situation diplomatically," Taemin began, but Park cut him off. "Handle it? You married an alien, Taemin. Without authorization, without consultation, without even understanding what you were doing." Park's voice rose with each word. "The president is furious. The Secretary of State wants your diplomatic credentials revoked. I've been ordered to bring you home immediately." "What about the alliance negotiations?" Taemin asked. "We're supposed to establish trade agreements and—" "Forget the trade agreements," Park snapped. "The whole mission is compromised now. How can we negotiate as equals when our representative is legally bound to one of their citizens? It's a conflict of interest that violates every diplomatic protocol we have." The connection ended abruptly, leaving Taemin staring at the empty hologram projector. His hands were shaking slightly as the full weight of his situation hit him. His career was over. His reputation was destroyed. His entire life back on Earth was falling apart because of one misunderstood ceremony. "Your leader pack seems distressed," Lyra Seth observed quietly. "Is this because of our bonding?" Before Tamin could answer, his communicator chimed again. This time it was Speaker Kethmiran, along with 3 other luminary elders he hadn't met before. Their combined glow was so bright it hurt to look at directly. "Honored bondmate," the speaker began formally, "we have received concerning communications from your people. They wish to dissolve your sacred union with Lyra Seth. They don't understand our customs," Tamin said carefully. "To them, this looks like I acted without proper authority. But you cannot dissolve what has been sealed by the light." Another elder interjected, her voice resonating with harmonic overtones. "The bond seal has fused with both your life essences. To break it would mean death for both parties." "More importantly," Kethmiran continued, "this union represents the ultimate trust between our species. If your people reject this sacred bond, how can we believe they will honor any agreement between us? Your marriage has become the foundation of our alliance." Tamin felt like he was being crushed between 2 immovable forces. Earth wanted him to end the marriage that couldn't be ended. The Luminari had made his marriage the cornerstone of interspecies relations. There was no way to satisfy both sides. Later that day, as he sat in his quarters, trying to figure out some impossible solution, he heard a strange noise coming from the bathroom. It sounded like a waterfall, but much louder. He rushed to investigate, and found his bathroom completely flooded. Water was cascading from the ceiling, pooling on the floor, and somehow defying gravity by flowing upward along the walls. In the middle of this aquatic chaos stood Lyra Seth, soaking wet and looking thoroughly confused. "I was attempting to prepare the water ceremony you showed me," she explained, raising her voice to be heard over the rushing water, "but I may have used too much energy manipulation." Tamin stared at the disaster, then started laughing. He couldn't help it. The whole situation was so absurd, so completely impossible, that laughter was the only sane response. "It's called a shower," he said, still chuckling as he waded through the ankle-deep water to reach the control panel. "And it's supposed to be a gentle spray, not an indoor tsunami." Lyra Seth's glow dimmed with embarrassment. "I'm sorry, my mate. I wanted to learn your customs properly. I have been studying human bonding rituals, but I seem to misunderstand many things." As Tamin worked to shut off the water systems, he noticed something that made his chest tighten with an unexpected emotion. Lyra Seth had been trying to take a human-style shower because she'd seen him do it. She was attempting to be more like him, to bridge the gap between their species through small, everyday actions. "You don't have to change yourself for me," he said softly. "But I want to," she replied, reaching out to touch his hand. "You are important to me, Tamin, more important than I expected when we were first bonded." Standing there in his flooded bathroom, holding hands with a being made of living light, Tamin realized that maybe the politicians and diplomats were missing the point entirely. The emergency alert screamed through every communication device in the Luminari capital at exactly 14:32 station time. Tamin was in the middle of teaching Lyra Seth how to use silverware without accidentally melting it when the red warning lights began flashing throughout their quarters. "Priority Alpha transmission from Earth Fleet Command," the automated voice announced. "All diplomatic personnel report to secure channels immediately." Tamin's blood ran cold. Priority Alpha meant only one thing: humanity was under attack. The holographic display flickered to life, showing Admiral Kim's grim face. Behind her, the command center was chaos. Officers ran between stations, screens displayed tactical readouts, and the distant sound of alarms created an atmosphere of barely controlled panic. "All Earth diplomatic posts, this is Fleet Command," Admiral Kim began without preamble. "At 11:47 Earth Standard Time, an unknown hostile force attacked mining station Kepler 7. We've lost contact with over 3,000 civilians." The display switched to grainy footage from the station's outer cameras. Tamin watched in horror. As massive insect-like ships emerged from what looked like tears in space itself, the vessels were covered in organic-looking armor that seemed to absorb light, making them appear as moving voids against the starfield. "We're calling them Devourers," the Admiral continued. "They don't respond to any communication attempts. They don't take prisoners. They completely strip mine any installation they attack, then move on to the next target. The footage showed the alien ships latching onto the mining station like parasites. Within minutes, the entire structure was being systematically dismantled and consumed by some kind of energy beam. "We need every available ally," Admiral Kim said, her voice cracking slightly. "These things are heading toward our core systems. Earth itself could be at risk." The transmission ended, leaving Taemin staring at the empty display. Beside him, Lyra Seth had gone completely solid, her usual gentle glow dim with concern. "Your people are in great danger," she said quietly. Taemin nodded, already reaching for his diplomatic communicator. "I need to contact the Light Council immediately. If humanity and the Luminari work together, maybe we can stop these devourers." "Before Taemin," Lyra Seth interrupted gently. "The Council will not provide military assistance." He froze. "What do you mean?" "We are a peaceful people. We have not engaged in warfare for over 1,000 of your years. It is against our most fundamental beliefs to take life, even to save life." Within an hour, Taemin found himself standing before the assembled Light Council, pleading for help, while his people faced extinction. The 5 elders listened politely as he explained the situation, their expressions sympathetic but unmoved. "We understand your distress, honored bondmate," Speaker Keith Mirren said finally, "but we cannot violate our sacred commitment to nonviolence. To take life, even alien life that threatens others, would corrupt our very essence." "Then help us evacuate," Taemin begged. "Your ships are faster than ours. You could save millions of lives." "We will provide humanitarian aid after the conflict ends," another elder offered, "but we cannot participate in military action of any kind." Taemin felt his world crashing down around him. The alliance he'd been sent to negotiate was worthless if it only applied during peacetime. Without Luminari technology and resources, humanity didn't stand a chance against the Devourers. That night, he sat in his quarters, staring at reports, streaming in from Earth, more attacks, more mining stations going dark. The Devourers were moving through human space like a plague, consuming everything in their path. "The Council has decided to recall all our ships from human space," Lyra Seth said quietly as she materialized beside him. "They fear the Devourers might attack Luminari vessels if we appear to be allied with you." "So that's it," Taemin said bitterly. "They're abandoning us completely." "Not completely," Lyra Seth said, reaching for his hand. "I am still bonded to you. My life force is connected to yours through the light band." Taemin looked down at the bracelet on his wrist. For weeks he'd seen it as a trap, a mistake that had ruined his career and his life. But now, as he felt the warm pulse of energy flowing between him and Lyra Seth, he began to see it differently. "What exactly does this bond do?" he asked. "I mean beyond the emotional connection? Our life energies are synchronized," she explained. "In theory, we could combine our bioelectric fields to create harmonic resonances, but such a joining would require complete trust, absolute unity of purpose." "Harmonic resonances that could do what?" Lyra Seth's glow brightened slightly. "Disrupt electronic systems, overload energy-based weapons, perhaps even tear holes in space-time itself, though that would be extremely dangerous." Taemin stared at her, his mind racing. The Devourers used energy-based technology. Their ships seemed to operate on principles similar to the Luminari light manipulation abilities. If he and Lyra Seth could somehow amplify their bond, create a weapon out of their marriage, it would mean accepting the bond as real, Lyra Seth said, reading his thoughts through their connection. "Not as a diplomatic accident, but as a true joining of souls. The power only comes from genuine unity." Taemin looked at the reports of destroyed human settlements, then at his wife, because that's what she was, he realized, whether he'd intended it or not. "Then let's save both our peoples," he said, taking her hand. Together. The first test nearly killed them both. Taemin sat cross-legged on the floor of their quarters, facing Lyra Seth in the meditation position she'd shown him. The light band on his wrist pulsed steadily, matching the rhythm of his heartbeat. Around them, the floating crystals she'd installed weeks ago hummed with barely contained energy. "Remember," Lyra Seth said softly, her form shifting between solid and translucent, "you must open your mind completely. No barriers, no hidden thoughts, no fear. Easy for you to say, Tamin muttered. Your people are naturally telepathic. Humans aren't built for this kind of connection. That is what makes it so powerful, she replied. The bond between our species creates resonances that neither could achieve alone, but it only works with absolute trust. Tamin closed his eyes and tried to relax. For 3 days they'd been practicing this mental synchronization, trying to unlock whatever power their marriage bond contained. The results had been explosive, literally. They'd already blown out 2 sets of room lights and accidentally shattered a crystal wall. Think of something that connects us, Lyra Seth instructed. A shared memory, a moment when you felt our unity. Tamin's mind drifted back to the morning he'd found his bathroom flooded, the image of Lyra Seth standing in the chaos, soaking. Wet and embarrassed, trying so hard to understand human customs. The moment when he'd realized she was changing herself, not because she had to, but because she wanted to make him happy. The light band flared to life. Energy coursed through Tamin's body like liquid lightning. He could feel Lyra Seth's thoughts merging with his own, her memories becoming his memories. For an instant, he saw the universe through her eyes, planets as glowing pearls of life energy, space itself alive with invisible currents of power. Then, the sensation intensified beyond what his human brain could handle. "Stop!" he gasped, breaking the connection. The energy backlash sent both of them flying across the room. Tamin hit the wall hard, his vision filled with sparks that had nothing to do with Lyra Seth's natural glow. "The power is there," she said breathlessly, picking herself up from where she'd landed near the doorway. "I could feel it building, but you pulled back at the crucial moment." "Because it felt like my brain was going to melt," Tamin said, rubbing his aching head. "There has to be another way." That evening, as reports continued to flood in from the human colonies under attack, Lyra Seth sat beside him on their bed. She'd taken her most human-like form, solid and warm to the touch. "The Devourers attacked the agricultural station at Tau Ceti today," she said quietly, reading from his communication device. 200,000 people. Tamin stared at the casualty reports. Each number represented a life, a family, someone's hopes and dreams snuffed out by these cosmic predators. The guilt was eating him alive. He had the power to help them, but he couldn't access it. "Tell me again what complete synchronization means," he said. Lyra Seth's expression grew serious. "It means becoming truly bonded, not just by ceremony, but by choice. It means accepting that our lives are intertwined forever, that we are no longer 2 separate beings, but 2 parts of one greater whole." "And that scares you too," Tamin observed, reading the uncertainty in her glowing features. "Yes," she admitted. "To achieve that level of unity, I would have to give up part of what makes me Luminari. I would become something new, something hybrid. There would be no going back." They sat in silence for a long moment, watching the stars through their transparent wall. Somewhere out there, the Devourers were consuming another human settlement. Somewhere else, Luminari refugees were fleeing deeper into space, abandoning the alliance rather than fight. "My supervisor called again today," Tamin said finally. "Earth wants me to come home. Forget about the marriage. Pretend none of this ever happened. And what do you want?" Tamin looked at her, really looked at her. When had she stopped being a diplomatic complication and started being the most important person in his life? When had he stopped seeing her as an alien and started seeing her as his wife? "I want to save everyone," he said. "Both our peoples. But that means I can never go back to being just human, can I?" "No," Lyra Seth said softly. "If we achieve true unity, you will become the bridge between our species, the first human Luminari hybrid consciousness. Your old life, your old identity, will be gone forever." The weight of the decision pressed down on him like a physical force. Millions of lives hung in the balance. 2 entire civilizations faced extinction, and the only way to save them was to sacrifice everything he'd ever been. "There's something else," Lyra Seth continued hesitantly. "If we achieve full synchronization and use that power against the Devourers, the energy output might kill us both. The bond that gives us strength could also be our destruction." Tamin laughed, but there was no humor in it. So my choices are, let everyone die while I stay safely human, or probably die trying to save them while becoming something entirely new. Yes. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the stars where his people were fighting for their lives. Behind him he could feel Lyra Seth's gentle presence, patient and understanding. She would support whatever choice he made, even if it meant living with the knowledge that they could have saved millions. But that wasn't really a choice at all. Tomorrow, he said, turning back to her. Tomorrow, we try again. And this time, I won't pull back. The human defense fleet looked pathetically small against the backdrop of infinite space. Taemin counted only 12 ships as their luminary transport approached the battle zone near the mining colony of New Sol. The Devourers had been systematically destroying human settlements for 2 weeks, and this was humanity's last stand. Before the alien swarm reached Earth itself, Fleet Command, this is Transport Vessel Harmony, requesting permission to join the defensive formation, Taemin said into the communication device, his voice steady despite the fear churning in his stomach. Admiral Kim's face appeared on the screen, her expression a mixture of desperation and disbelief. Taemin, what are you doing here, and why are you on a Luminari ship? I'm bringing a weapon, he replied simply, something that might work against the Devourers. Through the transparent hull of their transport, Taemin could see the enemy. Ships approaching. They looked like massive insects made of living shadow, their organic hulls seeming to absorb light itself. There were at least 50 of them, each one larger than humanity's biggest battleship. Whatever you're planning, you'd better do it fast, Admiral Kim said. We've got maybe 20 minutes before they're in firing range. Taemin turned to Lyra Seth, who was floating beside him in her energy form. They'd spent the entire journey from the Luminari homeworld preparing for this moment, practicing their synchronization until they could maintain a mental connection for hours at a time. Are you ready? He asked. As ready as one can be for something that has never been attempted before, she replied, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated through his bones. They moved to the center of the transport's main chamber, where the Luminari crew had installed a special crystalline platform designed to amplify energy resonances. Taemin sat cross-legged on the smooth surface, while Lyra Seth took her position directly across from him. Remember, she said, as her form began to solidify, once we begin full synchronization, there's no stopping the process. We either succeed, or we die together. Taemin nodded, placing his hands on hers. The light band on his wrist was already glowing brighter than he'd ever seen it, responding to their proximity and shared purpose. For both our peoples, he said. For both our peoples, she agreed. The moment their minds touched, Taemin felt like he was falling into an ocean of liquid starlight. Lyra Seth's consciousness wrapped around his own, and suddenly he wasn't just human anymore. He was experiencing life as a being of pure energy, seeing the universe through senses he'd never possessed. Every fear he'd ever hidden, every doubt about their relationship, every moment of loneliness from his years as a diplomat, it all flowed between them like water, finding its level. In return, he felt Lyra Seth's own struggles, her terror at bonding with a solid-form being, her joy at discovering love across species barriers, her desperate hope that their sacrifice would mean something. Their combined consciousness expanded beyond the confines of their individual minds. Through the ship's sensors, they could perceive the approaching Devourer fleet as writhing masses of hungry darkness, feeding on the life energy of everything they consumed. Now, Lyra Seth's voice echoed in his mind, though whether she'd spoken, aloud or directly into his thoughts, he couldn't tell. They released their combined power in a pulse that lit up space like a newborn star. The wave of harmonic energy spread outward from their ship, invisible ripples, washing over the human defense fleet harmlessly before slamming into the Devourer formation. The effect was immediate and devastating. The alien ship's organic hulls began to convulse and spark as their bioelectric systems overloaded. Several of the smaller vessels simply shut down completely, drifting powerless in space. The larger ones writhed like wounded animals, their weapon systems failing as contradictory energy signatures tore through their nervous systems. But the effort was killing them. Taemin could feel his life force being drained away, converted into the raw energy needed to maintain their harmonic field. Beside him, Lyra Seth was beginning to flicker between solid and energy states uncontrollably. "We have to maintain it," she gasped, though her voice seemed to come from very far away. "If we stop now, they'll recover." Through their shared consciousness, Taemin experienced a flash of memory that wasn't his own. Lyra Seth as a child, learning to manipulate light for the first time, her joy at creating something beautiful from pure energy. Then another memory, this one his, standing on a hillside on Earth, watching his first sunrise and feeling completely at peace with the world. "I love you," he said, and meant it more deeply than he'd ever meant anything in his life. "I love you." "Too," she replied, her essence intertwining with his until he couldn't tell where he ended and she began. The harmonic pulse intensified, and 3 more devourer ships went dark. But Taemin could feel their synchronized heartbeats beginning to falter, their combined life force burning away like fuel in a fire. In the distance, he heard Admiral Kim's voice over the communication system. "Whatever you two are doing, it's working. Half their fleet is disabled, but they wouldn't live to see the victory." Taemin could feel his human body shutting down, overwhelmed by energies it was never designed to channel. Lyra Seth was dispersing, her energy form losing cohesion as she poured everything she had into their shared weapon. In what might have been their final moment, their consciousness merged completely. For an instant that felt like eternity. They were one being with 2 sets of memories, 2 species worth of dreams and fears and hopes for the future. Then darkness claimed them both. Taemin woke up to the steady beeping of medical equipment and the antiseptic smell of a hospital room. For a moment he thought he was back on Earth, until he tried to open his eyes and saw the world completely differently than he ever had before. Everything was alive with energy. The walls pulsed with gentle currents of electricity. The medical machines hummed with visible frequencies of light. Even the air itself sparkled with tiny particles of life force that danced like microscopic fireflies. "The energy site will fade in time," a familiar voice said softly, "though you may always retain some sensitivity to it." Taemin turned his head, a movement that sent waves of rainbow light through his vision, and saw Lyra Seth sitting beside his bed. She looked different, too. More solid somehow, more permanently human-shaped, though she still glowed with her characteristic warm light. "How long?" he asked, his voice coming out as a croak. 6 days, she replied, taking his hand. "The doctors weren't sure you would wake up. Your brain patterns were unlike anything they'd seen, part human, part something else entirely." Slowly the memories came flooding back. The battle, the desperate joining of their consciousness, the moment when they'd become something greater than the sum of their parts, channeling enough energy to cripple an entire alien fleet. "Did it work?" he asked. Lyra Seth smiled, a purely human expression that looked natural on her face now. "The Devourers retreated after losing 37 ships. The remaining vessels fled back through the spatial tiers they came from. Human space is safe." Taemin tried to sit up, wincing as his body protested. "And us? Are we changed?" She said simply. "The complete synchronization left marks on both of us. I can feel individual identity now, the way humans experience separateness from each other. It's strange and wonderful and sometimes lonely." As she spoke, Taemin became aware of something new in his own mind. A constant, gentle presence that felt like warmth and starlight, Lyra Seth's consciousness permanently intertwined with his own. Not overwhelming like during the battle, but always there, a reminder that he was no longer entirely human. "We're bonded for real now," he realized, not just by ceremony or accident, but by choice. "Yes," she said, squeezing his hand. "I hope that doesn't frighten you." Taemin considered this. A month ago, the idea would have terrified him. Now, feeling her presence in his mind like a second heartbeat, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. "No," he said, "it feels right." The door to his hospital room slid open, and Admiral Kim entered, followed by Director Park and someone Taemin didn't recognize, a woman in an expensive suit who carried herself with the confidence of high political office. "Secretary Walsh," Admiral Kim announced. Earth's new Secretary of Interspecies Relations. The woman stepped forward, her expression carefully neutral. Mr. Tamin, I've come to personally thank you for your service to humanity. Your actions saved millions of lives. Our actions, Tamin corrected, gesturing to Lyraseth. We did it together. Yes, about that, Secretary Walsh continued. The situation has become quite complex from a political standpoint. Your marriage, which was previously seen as a diplomatic embarrassment, is now being hailed as the breakthrough that saved our species. Director Park, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke up. The President wants to offer you a new position, Ambassador to the Luminari, with full diplomatic immunity and recognition of your marriage under Earth law. The Luminari government has made a similar offer, Secretary Walsh added. They want both of you to serve as permanent liaisons between our peoples. Apparently, your unique connection makes you invaluable for interspecies communication. Tamin looked at Lyraseth, and through their bond he could feel her mixed emotions, excitement at the possibility of bridging their two worlds, but also uncertainty about what this new role would mean for their relationship. What exactly would we be doing? Lyraseth asked. Teaching others, Admiral Kim said. Both sides want to understand how you achieved that level of synchronization. If we could train other human luminary pairs to work together the way you did, we'd have a weapon against future threats, Tamin finished. But more than that, we'd have real unity between our species. Through the energy sight that still flickered at the edges of his vision, Tamin could see the hope radiating from the three officials. They were looking at him and Lyraseth not as a diplomatic accident, but as the future of interspecies relations. There's one condition, Tamin said, feeling Lyraseth's agreement through their bond. We do this as equals, not as Earth's representative, or the Luminari's representative, but as something new, a partnership that belongs to both worlds. Secretary Walsh smiled for the first time since entering the room. I think that can be arranged. As the officials left to make their preparations, Tamin settled back into his hospital bed, still holding Lyraseth's hand. Through their connection, he could feel her contentment, and his own. They had started as strangers thrown together, by accident. Now they were partners by choice, ready to help both their peoples build a future neither could achieve alone. 2 years after the Devourer crisis, the Harmony Station orbited peacefully between Earth and the Luminary homeworld. The massive space station served as neutral ground for both species, but its most famous residents lived in a modest apartment in the diplomatic quarter. Tamin stood at the window of their kitchen, watching a group of human students practice energy manipulation in the station's central plaza. Their movements were clumsy compared to natural luminary grace, but 3 of them had managed to create small, stable light constructs, a feat that would have been impossible before the integration program began. Jin Wu is showing real promise, Lyraseth said, materializing beside him with a cup of actual coffee. She'd learned to appreciate human beverages, though she still occasionally made them glow by accident. His harmonic resonance increased by 15% this week. Better than my diplomatic language lessons? Tamin asked, accepting the warm mug. Through their permanent mental connection, he could feel her amusement. You taught the Centauri, Ambassador, that he had beautiful tentacles instead of honored appendages, she pointed out. Jinwu has never accidentally insulted an entire species. Their apartment was a perfect blend of both their worlds. Human furniture sat alongside floating luminary crystals. The walls displayed both family photos from Earth and energy pattern, art that shifted with their moods. It was home in a way that nowhere else had ever been. The door chimed and their first appointment of the day arrived, David Park and his luminary partner, Senthara. They were one of 12 human luminary couples who had volunteered for the bonding program, hoping to recreate the defensive capabilities that Tamin and Lyraseth had discovered. How are the synchronization exercises going? Lyraseth asked, as the couple settled onto the adaptive furniture that could accommodate both solid and energy beings. We can maintain mental contact for about an hour now, David replied, unconsciously reaching for Senthara's hand. But we're nowhere near the level of unity you two achieved. That's because you're trying too hard, Tamin said, remembering his own struggles. The power doesn't come from forcing a connection. It comes from genuine understanding, from choosing to be vulnerable with someone completely different from yourself. Senthara's form flickered with curiosity. But how do we learn to trust so completely? David's mind feels so dense, so focused on individual thoughts instead of shared experience. And Senthara thinks in pure emotion, David added. Sometimes, I feel like I'm drowning in feelings that aren't even mine.